A Blueprint for Christian Thought and Living. God and Man, Part 2, The Fall. Welcome back to our illustrated video series, A Blueprint for Christian Thought and Living. This is the second of 6 videos focused on man. Here we examine the relational estrangement and alienation between God and man. We will briefly consider God as always loving us. God is for us, not against us. God knew exactly what was necessary to redeem and restore humanity. Redeem from death and restore to life. And in contrast, we'll look at fallen man as humanity incapable of being man as God intended. Mankind helpless and hopeless to resolve fallen spiritual condition. Trapped, lost, blind, deaf, lame, broken, and sick. Initially in creation, God and man shared a personal relationship of spiritual union. At the moment when God breathed into man, man's spirit, the breath, divine spirit, of life, man became a living soul. Inbreathed life of God into man signified the initial indwelling spiritual presence of God and man. And the tree of life represented the subsequent choice by man to allow, continue receptive to, God's life to be derivatively lived out in human behavior. Note, the tree of life equals absolute good, God's being, and the tree of knowledge equaled relative good, Satan's scheming. The fall of man into sin resulted in man being alienated from spiritual relationship union with God. God wouldn't be an unwanted resident within man. God desires only a freely chosen faith-love relationship with man. God only knocks on, doesn't kick in doors. The human race became estranged from God and hostile in mind toward God, even enemies of God. Since human beings cannot be independent beings or selves, capable of self-generating their own character function, the lie of humanism, the only alternative to God's operative presence in mankind is Satan's usurping the place of God in the very spirit of man. Man before, without Christ. Humans are dead in trespasses and sin by the prince and power of the air, Satan, who is the spirit that works in the sons of disobedience. Spiritual death and behavioral implications of dead works are at work in humans. One having the power of death, that is the devil, is in control of God's created human beings. Spiritual death is not a privation of non-being or a vacuum of non-function. Spiritual death is Satan's personal presence indwelling human spirits. Function, manifesting selfish and sinful character in human behavior. The spiritual always manifests in, drives the psychological and physiological. God is love. He's always desirous that human beings will be receptive creatures, in whom he will exhibit his character unto his glory. God is always for humans, not against us. God knew exactly what was necessary to redeem from death and sin and restore to life and righteousness. God's only solution to man's greatest problem, the condition of spiritual death, is his own presence of life being within man. personally inhabiting man. Man in fallen spiritual condition. Humanity is incapable of being man as God intended man to be, though still fully human, remains in fallen condition, helpless and hopeless to resolve their fallen spiritual condition. No amount of self-effort, self-resolve, and self-reparation could reconcile man with God again, contrary to the lies of humanism. Divine foreknowing. God knew from eternity past, before creation, what he was going to do to redeem and restore man to himself. God wasn't taken by surprise by man's fall. God is panic-proof. God never has to revert to a plan B. There's no contingency plan. There's but one will of God, which is divine spirit as spiritual source of life within the spirit of man. God, in his foreknowledge, knows the beginning and the end. In our next video, we will further examine the recreation of mankind and its results.